G'day Whisky Club, it's Nigel and Jonnie relaxing in the Whisky Club HQ garden. It's a beautiful day and we're enjoying a lovely drop of a peated whiskey, and we're going to talk about peat because it's one of my favourite kinds of whiskey. I know it's one of his favourite kinds of whiskey as well, but you may or may not know anything about it, so we're going to fix that for you right now. And Jonnie, tell us exactly what is peat, and I don't mean your mate.
my uncle Peat. So, it's a great question. Now, peat actually is just broken down plant matter over the course of 1,000 to 2,000 years, and before it reaches coal. So, it's essentially a fuel source.
So it's a pre-fossil fuel?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And why is it used in whiskey production? How does it get into it? What's the story?
So, as a fuel and a base, this was, and it's quite prevalent around Scotland, so people use peat for fuel. Literally, for burning, to keep themselves warm at night, through to actually kilning the barley in the malting process, which...
So back in the day, people would have burnt this in their homes instead of an electric heater?
Oh, well, no electric heaters, more than 100 years ago.
Exactly.
So, yeah, absolutely. Peat was used as a warming agent, or a heat agent.
Okay, and so how does the smell get into the whiskey? It's in the kiln, and it's burnt underneath the barley?
Yeah, so there's a stage during the malting process where they need to kiln and dry the barley out. Now, what they do is they put peat underneath it in these big kilns. They burn it. It burns really quite slowly, but nice and hot. And as it dries out the barley, it actually sucks in the smoke as it's going through. So all this barley that has been kilned and ready to use for whiskey production has all been essentially smoke infused.
Yeah, okay, and that brings on the flavours. But some peated whiskies taste very different to other peated whiskies. What's the go?
Well, again, being an organic compound, you're going to see different flavours from depending on where you pick up the peat from. We look at Isla. Again, that really quite iodine, robust peat that they come through, and that's from broken down kelp and sea spray in their peat bogs.
Yeah, okay. And then for, say, a Highland Park, it's...
Again, you get that bracken and heather character, which really shines again through in their spirit.
Yep.
And for Highlands, we look at the most recent example with Ben Riach. It's more of a nutty characteristic. There's a little bit of smoke there. And closer to home, where we fortunately got this peat to be able to show you guys, from the Lark Distillery, which have their own peat bog in the middle of Tasmania.
So they're not digging that up out of the back of Cambridge. It's actually way up in the Central Highlands of Tassie.
It's a full day trip up there with the trailer, I'm pretty sure, to access the peat from the peat bog.
Yeah, I'm going to say I pity the guy that I'm going to be sitting next to in the bus on the way home after I leave here. Okay, great. So, and ppm is something else that we see when it comes to peated whiskey. What's that?
So ppm just stands for parts per million. And that parts per million is a direct line to what the parts per million of phenols were in the barley before it got put into the mash tun.
So you see some that are as low as 3, some that are around 50. Different distilleries as a house style, I guess. Yep. Will do around that sort of ballpark figure for all of their whiskey.
Yeah, you're bang on. It's about 3 ppm, so really light, just a touch of peat coming through.
So it's going to be fairly noticeable, isn't it?
Very, yeah, quite not a huge amount.
Yep.
And that's when we look at Oban Distillery.
Yep.
And then as we scroll through, we've got a number of distilleries in between, and on the far end of that scale is actually Ardbeg, and they're sitting up at 50 ppm overall.
Yep.
So
And
really quite smoky.
yeah, okay, but then of course there's always
one rule breaker at the end of the day, and fortunately we're actually sitting on one of their whiskies, believe it or not. This is the Octomore. Now, famous from the Brooklady Distillery, based on Isla, and Brooklady just a little bit out of the norm. They've pushed their ppms up to 250 plus. So literally 5 times the amount that you see in Ardbeg, which is really quite a smoky and powerful whiskey overall.
Yeah, okay. And does that ppm number translate to the finished product on a set scale, or is it?
It's a good question. I'd say not overall. You don't see probably the smoky characteristics dialed up 5 times that's in an Ardbeg.
Yep.
You definitely see a lot more earthiness. You see a lot more those nutty characteristics, and just generally it's a huge whiskey overall. So really quite robust. And really quite just different to what you normally see in a smoky whiskey.
Yeah, okay. And speaking of smoky whiskey, is smokiness and peatiness the same thing?
Well, they're derived from phenols, but they do come across differently on the nose and the palate. So, again, smoke we can relate to because we can understand smoke. You know, sitting at a campfire, it's just smelling this burn now.
Yeah.
But peat comes across differently, and that's where you get that iodine, you get that Bracken and heather influence, and that's where you get that nuttiness and those sweet notes as well.
Excellent. Well, I think that's enough chat. And bottoms up.
Bottoms up.
Cheers. Slunger.
Slunger bar.
That ring. Amazing. Whisky Club, official Glencairn. Grab yours.
Absolutely. And before we forget, Octomore 12.2, exclusive to the Whisky Club. Whew, by Brooke Laddie.
How could we forget?
Absolutely fantastic for our January outing. So, hope you guys enjoy, and don't forget to add in that Octomore. Cheers.